Let's go, guys. So just a quick recap again from an objective standpoint, just so everybody understands kind of what we're trying to achieve here. Is that again a large number of participants, most with little or no exposure to OSE, a handful with some more extensive exposure. So the really target audience here are the folks with no exposure, bringing them up, giving them some fundamental level of understanding and knowledge of OSE. Also, one of the key things was to provide some hands-on experience. So give you an opportunity to perform some exercises on your own, um, and then also walk through those kind of in live demo mode. All right. Again, we'll rip through here. We got sentimental and reminisced about Gen 0 and Gen 1, and all agreed that Gen 2 is much better and much more scalable for partner and client use. Again, some of the key concepts here, again, just terminology that we'll use throughout the training. The first being the concept of objects. So again, when we hear object, think about kind of our primary supply chain business transactions, such as purchase orders or invoices or ASNs or forecast plans and so on. Those are really our key objects. When we talk about fields, those are basically think of that as what describes those objects. So each object may have a unique set of fields that define those objects, and that will really be key from the standpoint of what we're performing from a configuration standpoint within OSE is working with these fields, especially from a UI configuration standpoint. Then the last concept is the concept of operations. So for each of these objects, think that an operation is if I want to create a new purchase order, that's one operation. If I want to edit a purchase order, that's another. If I want to search my existing purchase orders, that's a third operation. So just wanted to reintroduce those terms, guys, and a little refresh. Again, from an OSE configuration standpoint, we want to understand kind of the three different key types of fields. Again, a simple field such as what's my purchase order number, what's my order date for the purchase order. Again, those are kind of individual standalone fields that I will drag and drop independently within OSE and place within sections on a page, and those will be handled and managed kind of independently as their own field. The other key concept from a field type standpoint is that of groups. Again, we discussed that on Tuesday a little bit. But again, the best example there is how do we identify a location or an address, for instance. So if I have an address to completely describe that, I need multiple fields. So those are handled and managed as a logical group of fields, not really independently. Again, as we saw in the demo portion the other day, when I place a group on a screen, I just drag and I drop that. I get all the fields within that group, but then I can actually manage those fields independently. So if if a group contains 30 fields, for instance, I have the capability to on my OSE editor and author mode rearrange those fields. I have the capability to hide or remove fields depending upon the requirements of my client. Then the last kind of key type of field is what we call a collection. Again, keep it simple. The best example of that are going to be line items on our business objects. So think of line items on a purchase order, line items on an invoice, for instance. So again, it's kind of a one purchase order to a zero to many relationship for our line items. Again, these collections can be managed, as a table, which is kind of the most common, or as a list mode. Again, we'll focus on the table for the fundamental training. And again, we saw the concept of having a table to display the zero to many line items, and then also the concept of panels, basically to view additional fields that are associated with a line item, or if I need to add a new line item or edit a line item. Again, in table format, we're kind of restricted to, maybe, 8, 9, 10 fields that we can squeeze on our table, but oftentimes at the line item level, again, as we've seen with some of our clients who want to, add company specific fields, there's many more fields that describe a line item. So we need to be able to manage those in our push panels. Again, real quickly here, kind of the main layout of a screen here, if you will, or page within Gen 2 or Gen 2 solutions. And it will speak directly to kind of how we configure these. Is that we have our main content area represented by number 1. So again, in this case, it's a search page for our object being purchase orders. And this will be our main content area. With each screen, we'll have kind of a dynamic set of a toolbar with a dynamic set of icons or buttons, depending upon the page type and the object. We have again introduced the concept of push panels here. So when we need to view additional detail, edit objects and so on, or perform different functions like removing fields, for instance, we'll have a push panel. Again, we noted that a big improvement here from Gen 0, Gen 1 to Gen 2 is that, in the old days, this was an overlay panel. So when we brought up this side panel, it would overlay a portion of our main content area. Now it's a true push panel, and we still have visibility to that entire content area. So that's a great change for us. Then over on the left-hand side is kind of where we see our submenus and then our individual menu items. And again, what we'll see, for Mint, for instance, that's kind of really our focus right now, is that these menu items, for the most part, correspond to a business object. And you see here purchase orders, invoices, so on. Again, we talked a little bit about the architecture, if you will, for Gen 2. And how it differs from Gen 0 and Gen 1. Again, we said in Gen 0 and Gen 1, the good news in a way is that you had the flexibility to really create any type of screen you wanted. You could navigate from, any screen to another screen. There really weren't any limitations or restrictions on what you could do. So from the standpoint of, the person configuring or satisfying client requirements, that was great. But again, there was a lot of risk in that also, and there were really no guardrails to what a designer or someone configuring the solution could do. So they could also get themselves into a fair amount of trouble. So again, and that really, I don't think, was scalable to use by our clients or by our partners. So the nice thing with Gen 2 is that there are guardrails in place, that, as we're going to talk about here, number 1, and then 2, with that structure, I think it makes it a lot easier and quicker kind of to develop solutions and to configure solutions. So again, you may hear the term we talked about yesterday, or on Tuesday, excuse me, being Gen 2 being a little bit opinionated, and that's kind of speaks to this, in that there's really 3 main page types. The search page. So again, when you select a menu item from our left-hand menu here for a given object, by default, you'll be navigated to the search page. Again, you can configure around that. So when you select a menu item, you don't necessarily have to go to the search page, but I think in our standard solution, at least 99% of the time, you will go from this menu item to the search page and see a list of your object instances for that object type. So again, in this case, here are all our purchase orders. And then from there, from a navigation standpoint, you're really kind of limited to either creating a new purchase order and going to the new page, or I can select a hyperlink for a given object instance and go to my view edit page. Okay. Any questions there? All right. Again, now transition into kind of, what I call solution management. So how do I manage these solutions? And again, kind of have, 3 different buckets here, if you will, and just need to understand from a terminology standpoint. So think about it as, kind of the start of the process, at least now, is when TraceLink develops a new solution. So, our build team develops a new solution, and that is basically published to the world, if you will, as what's called a standard solution. So when we have a release, we'll publish that solution out as a standard solution, and once it's there, it's available for services personnel, for our clients, for our partners to utilize that. How they'll utilize that and configure that will be to save that standard solution down as a company solution. And again, as it says here, that could be our client, that could be services, that could be solution partners. And this is kind of where we'll use OSE in author mode to configure those solutions. Now, once we've done that, we have the option to then kind of promote that, if you will, into the marketplace. And once a solution is in the marketplace, again, it's available to clients, partners, our services team, and so on, really to anyone, to then basically download that from the marketplace down as a company solution and use the marketplace solution as my starting point versus a standard solution. Again, quick figure for us engineers. Again, company catalog, first step would be if I want to configure, I will download a solution from either the standard catalog or the marketplace catalog. And then optionally, once I'm done configuring, I can move that up to the marketplace. But again, from the standpoint of an individual client, I can just say copy down a standard solution, configure that, activate that, and then have my client actually use that configured solution. There's no need to promote that to the marketplace to have our clients utilize a configured solution. Again, we won't get into a lot of detail here. This is just again, the slide here as far as the save as process. So this is kind of how do we save a solution down from a catalog down as a company solution. And again, kind of from a going forward standpoint, we've got a couple of links here that basically we have a page with procedures, and there's a procedure here with this the Gen 2 procedures wiki that outlines each step and has a screen capture to kind of walk you through that. Again, kind of a key concept before we jump into taking a look at the solution, the OSE solution live, is the concept of panels. Again, we discussed this on Tuesday, but whenever you're configuring within OSE, you always have to first select what do I want to configure. And again, from a terminology standpoint, that's a panel. So as you see here, there will be a toolbar. It's called panels. And when you select that, you'll get a push panel here, and you can select all the different panels that are available for editing, basically within that given page. So in this case, it's the view edit page for purchase orders. And again, we've talked about push panels, but from an OSE configuration standpoint, the main page is as you see here. And so this main content area is also considered a panel. Okay. And again, that's going to be the default when you come into author mode within OSE. Okay. But then again, we talked about wanting to configure the push panels that define the information for our line items. That's what you see here. So if I wanted to view a line item, I would and configure that push panel, I'd select this and say apply. And then this content area would change to reflect the push panel for viewing a purchase order line item. All right. Any questions there, guys? And again, it might not be doing justice to some of our folks who weren't here Tuesday, but at least wanted to run through that and try to find a balance between best utilizing our time and kind of getting everybody up to speed. All right. And again, just quick review from a sandbox company. And again, I apologize for the folks from Lucy's team who've joined in that. Pretty much all of our other participants, about 60 participants or so, we set up sandbox companies within validation. Again, that was a couple week process working with ATS and performing some manual steps as we saw. That's something, Lucy, that we can see if we can get a couple of additional sandbox companies set up if there's value in that. But
yeah, I think we can ask the team because like anybody who's on the development side, that they probably have, they can access in themselves in the lower environments, and it'll be maybe, certain PMs or folks like that. So I think if we need more, it'll be a small number.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Thanks. And again, just kind of what these sandbox companies look like as we get in. We did enable OSE, ORD, and also administration again to perform some of those manual steps. like granting roles and setting up networks and so on. Again, when from the main menu, when we select OSE, we should see something like this here in the center. Again, back to our discussion on catalogs. This is kind of where you see how I can access the my standard solutions, and then save, access them here, save those down as a company solution. Here's where we access the marketplace. But again, as we come in, we should see basically a search screen, the object being our standard solutions in this case. Then also we can access Mint again. So again, from the main menu, we select My Networks. We should have pretty much everybody will have a Mint OSE training network that's been set up. We did have a little blip with a couple setups. So there's 2 or 3 where you might have a version number on the back end here, but everybody should have a Mint OSE training network. Any questions there, folks? All right. So again, we're not going to rehash kind of our search page. Some of the configuration concepts and techniques, if you will, we'll hit within the view edit page. So we're gonna proceed past that, and we're going to next focus on our view edit page. So again, in the interest of kind of getting everyone up to speed here, what I'm going to propose to do. Do a really quick run through of our view edit page demo, and then maybe turn you guys loose for 5 to 10 minutes to work on your own sandboxes, and then we'll get back together and review the exercise again, and kind of in the spirit of the objective of giving you some hands-on work here as opposed to listening to me. Again, as you saw, here's our within OSE. Here's our menu structure. So again, we saw from the slide, right, this is where we would manage our solutions with the catalog. So select our standard solution, save it as a company. Once we do that, kind of the end result will be if I go to my available company solutions menu item, select that, I will see in this case, most of our sandboxes will have one company solution, this OSE training Mint solution that we've set up. And again, the only thing I want to point out here again is this concept of activated. So again, this is what we had to work with ATS to do. And again, if this is not activated, so if I copy it down from the standard solution, it's not activated, I can still configure the solution. Again, just to emphasize that, it's a key point kind of from an understanding standpoint. So even if I don't have it activated, I can still configure that solution. The main difference there is that if I bounce over to Mint, I won't see those configurations reflected within Mint at that time, not until it's activated. When it is activated, if it's still in an edit state, then I can still continue to apply additional configuration changes to my solution and see those reflected in Mint as I go. So again, it's just kind of a key understanding of, am I activated or not? Either way, I can still configure. And then if I keep my solution in an edit state versus kind of releasing that, I can continue to configure even after it's activated. Any questions there? Does that make sense? All right. Again, once I have my company solution in place, probably again, the easiest way to edit it here is by selecting the menu item here, depending upon what I'm interested in editing or configuring, excuse me. Again, what's nice is we're restricted really to the three page types of new, search, and view edit at this time. That's going to be our main UI configuration will be performed with these 3 menu items. Hopefully we'll talk about workflows a little bit later and configuring workflows, because that's a common ask from a configuration standpoint. And then the other focus will kind of be on menus and roles. So this will be kind of the universe of my configuration options here within these menu items. So if I'm interested in configuring a view edit page, I'll select that. And again, similar to a business object, when I select a menu item, I'm brought to a search page. So again, instead of the object, think of it as instead of the object being a purchase order or an invoice, the object here is view edit pages. So here's my list of view edit pages. Again, I've got this filtered right now. So Again, a key thing to understand, we talked a little bit about Tuesday, is that, there's probably 150 plus view edit pages. So we have the capability to filter those kind of by business object type or page name. In this case, I've got it sorted by commerce sent purchase order. So again, just to show you, if I take this off, select apply, I'm basically taking my filter off, and you'll see that, we have a lot of these. So again, the best way to find what you're interested in is to go to filters. So if you do something like that, again, it's really nice as far as being able to kind of quickly find the business object type you're interested in. Again, you have to understand what orchestration you're interested in, like commerce versus external manufacturing and so on. Again, it's key to understand, and kind of what side of this transaction am I on? Am I interested in the sent purchase order or the received purchase order? So that's a key consideration also. So if I select that I'm interested in commerce sent purchase order and apply, that's going to bring me to just basically the 2 pages that I can select from. And again, I have to understand, am I on the customer side or the supplier side? And again, we can get there kind of through filtering. So again, from just a quick review, if I'm interested in commerce orchestration, customer sent purchase order, I'll select that. Again, as we saw, by default, we're going to come into the consumer mode or the view mode. So this will give me as a kind of designer configurer, excuse me, this will give me a view of how this page is going to look, for my end users within Mint. Okay. But within here, I can't edit. So when I want to edit or actually configure, I'll select edit. We'll see that the screen changes a little bit, and now I've got a series of icons or buttons here within my toolbar that will allow me to configure. And again, won't go into the detail we did on Tuesday, but again, from a configuration standpoint, if I have a simple field here like my title or my subtitle, and I want to configure that, I select it, then that will activate some of the icons or buttons on my toolbar. Again, configuring UI properties, then I can basically change this. So anything I'd like, shorten it up, say apply. Again, that's going to be immediately reflected here in edit mode. And again, if I wanted to save that, I could save it and then bounce over to Mint and see the impact of that change since my solution is activated. Again, we talked a little bit, we said that by default, you'll see your workflow here. And this workflow component will come by default. You can hide it, but I haven't come across a good reason to do that. So that's going to always be here. And then when you're using it within Mint, this is how you're going to, if you have a need to manually progress this object instance through the various workflow states and substates, this is how you do it through this tool. Again, we talked a little bit on Tuesday about managing the page, view edit page. So we have the concept of a section, which is right here. So this is an entire section. We've named it transaction information, and then we've dragged and dropped, 6 fields here within the section. Within the section, we have the concept of, if we go to configure UI properties for this section, if you recall, we can specify the title. We can specify, do we have 2 columns here or just 1 column of fields to display? So again, that's going to really depend upon the requirements from our clients. And then, when we initially bring up that page within Mint, do we want this to be expanded, as we see here? Or if we say collapse, then the default view will be something like this. Okay. And if we want to basically place, items on here, if we select our section and say drag and drop up here, then this will give us access to all of the fields for this object that are defined for this object that haven't already been dragged and dropped onto this page. Okay. And again, this works really well from the standpoint of finding fields. So again, you may have dozens of fields here, but if I'm interested in, the created by, user or date time, I can just, type CREA and I get that list of fields. So it filters really nicely here. I can grab my field that I'm interested in and drag and drop that. And again, if I want to reposition, if I want to take last transaction error from the first column and drop it over here, I can do that. It truly is drag and drop and works really nicely. And again, as we talked on Tuesday, for guys like Alok and Rich and myself, this is a huge step up and improvement from Gen 0 and Gen 1. So it's tough to appreciate it maybe without having been there, but take our word. It's a big step forward. So that is the kind of the concept of sections. Again, we have the capability, if we select this outer kind of rectangle, if you will, for the page, we have the ability, as we saw on Tuesday, to add a new section. So again, if we say, let me add a section, apply that, that's going to add a brand new section at the bottom of the screen. Then I have the capability, as we saw, and Greg was helpful and said we could collapse these, but we can drag and drop this section anywhere we'd like on this page, and then drag and drop fields onto this section. I'll pause for a sec. Any questions there, guys? And then lastly, again, we have the concept of line items. So again, these are managed a little bit differently. Again, it's a table within here. It's still a section that we've brought this collection into. Again, from a table standpoint, we have the capability to drag and drop fields into our table. So if we wanted to add address 1 into our table, we could do that. Again, it always adds it over here on the end. Then we have the capability to grab that column. It's a little touchy at times, but and reposition, reorder our columns. Again, we have the capability to change the headers for these columns. So if I select that column, select configure UI properties, I can knock off the one there, and now it's called address. So that's pretty easy. And again, the other thing to point out here is back to that slide on panels. So when we're configuring, we said we're always configuring a panel. By default, it'll be the main page panel. But like for line items like this, as we said, we can only display a limited number of fields for this line item in our table. But if we want to view, the other 10 or 20 or 30 fields associated with this line item, we can go to panels. And again, then we can say, let me take a look at my panel, my push panel where I view purchase order item details. If I select that, say apply, I was afraid of that. Since I made changes, it basically either makes you save it or discard. And really the only way, I'll just save it. Only way to discard, if you recall, is kind of go back to the search page for view edit page. So once we save, again, kind of the flow here is we'll go back into consumer mode or view mode so that we can see our changes. Again, like here, I added my created by user. I dragged last transaction over here. Now, if I want to go back in and edit my panel, let's select panel, view purchase order item details, apply. See that here. And again, I manage this just like I did my other. So if I have a section here that's item information, I can select, drag and drop, and I can just, drag additional components in and reorder them, as I'd like within this panel. Any questions there, guys? Again, I know quick review, but just trying to get everybody up to speed as best we can here.
Hey, John. Maybe we haven't done this yet as part of the exercise, but I can see where it says like drag and drop, and they're typically on the field level. But we also talked about like collections.
Yep.
So do collections show up in that as well?
Yes.
Or is that okay?
Yep. No, great question, Greg. Yeah. So like if we're back, yeah. But yes, basically, yeah, short answer is yes. So and again, we'll touch on that quickly. But yeah, that's if a collection would appear in the right hand push panel, I can drag and drop that entire collection. And then, as we said before, the nice thing about a collection is I drag and drop basically the collection. I get all the fields for that collection by default. I don't have to drag and drop each of those individual fields. But I do have the flexibility to then manage the individual fields. So again, like here's a ship to bill to location. So that's kind of easily relatable, right? So this entire collection here for ship to location, just as you said, Greg, that would appear as one entity, if you will, in that push panel. I drag and drop it. I get this entire, set of fields here for that ship to location. Then I think as we saw Tuesday, right, I can select that. And then if I'd like to within here, as I say, I never have address to, right? I can hide that, or I can remove that. So if I hide it, right, it displays like this. So when I go back into consumer mode or view mode, this will not be here, but I still have visibility to it. And again, as we talked on Tuesday, I'd recommend just hiding versus removing. That way, two things. Removing is a two-step process, so it's a little more efficient just to hide. And then also when I hide, it's easy to bring it back. If I want to bring it back to life, I just, this toggles between hide and show depending upon the state of the field. So, and then again, as we showed, we can move fields around within the collection. So it's nice in that it's easy to drag and drop, but then you can still have the flexibility to manage the fields individually within that collection.
Yeah, John, there was a question where someone was asking if you can create your own set of collections. And I think maybe talking about the relationship between the type defs and how the metadata model is defined and what you get to do in the user experience might be
warranted.
Sure,
keep me honest, Lucy. I'll try to keep it simple, but right from if I'm a member of the services team who's configuring here, I guess for the most part, right, I think you will work with the fields that are available. And when you go to, when you go to a section and say drag and drop, right, these are, as it stands right now, for the most part, these are going to be predefined for you within that object. And this will be kind of what's available for you to drag and drop. Again, working with a client right now who has, company specific fields, if you will. So we had to work with the build team kind of up front to, from a process standpoint, define those, kind of build the integration, if you will, and then have the build team define those on the object for us. Right, but before they're defined on the object, basically they will not appear here as something that we can drag and drop. So it's adding them to the object, regenerating the schema, and then having them available here to drag and drop on the field.
And maybe I can underscore a piece. So if you have that situation where you have customers that are asking for data fields that don't, so we'll cover a few classes, but if you have customers asking for data fields that don't exist in our data model, then that becomes a requirement that we add in. And so you'd come back and because the product team, kind of like what you saw in LSC, right, with track and trace and compliance, somebody needs a new field, we have to update the canonical, right? We have to update our core data model, we have to update the canonical, and then we have to update the business object subtype that really is driving all those fields that are showing up on the right. So people need new fields, we do the gap analysis, we get those in, and we have a process on a monthly basis, we can make updates to those kind of things. And the Mint team does that, and it's already incorporated as part of their process where on a monthly basis, they can include some of these customer updates. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is the layout, which is what the question sort of was related to. And you have a lot of degrees of freedom in how you can control the layout, except for when something is in a type def. So how it's modeled, I'm going to try not to get overly technical, but how that metadata model is defined in the back end and what that schema looks like and what fields already have relationships to each other. I want to take a field that's just a standalone field up here, and I want to add it into an address. Well, address is already a collection of fields, a group of fields that have a meaning together. They're an address block, right? And they already have relationships to each other and they mean something. So to take a field that's a standalone field out here and try to insert it into address, you can't do something like that. You have to work within the fields that exist within the definition of that address block. So those are sort of the constraints that are there, that when groupings of fields are already predefined to have relationships with each other because the business transaction itself expects that relationship to be there. And so when that's the case, that's fixed. You've got a little bit of degrees of freedom on how you might want to, like hide something, somebody doesn't need it, sometimes switching ordering, switching the labels, the fields, where you want it to show up in on the screen. Where do I want that ship to section to show up versus some other section? So you can handle that, manage that. When it's standalone fields, you can put them wherever you like. But when it's a group of fields that already have a predetermined relationship amongst each other, you can't now insert new fields into that equation unless we go back and we modify the data model and modify the canonical and modify the maps, because all of this interconnects along the way.
Yeah, Lucy, I just want to add one comment to that. Just so everyone knows, right? The main reason that we can't just add whatever we want without the engineering team is because the UI is directly interacting with Mint, which is our application that exchanges data. And in order for us to continue to be interoperable, we need to make sure that we maintain those data models, those canonicals. So we can't just add whatever we want because it would break our interoperability and we wouldn't have integrate once. So it's really important that we understand that customers might want to do whatever they want, but we need to maintain that integrate once model. And that's why we have to go back to the engineering if they want to add something we don't support.
Yeah, and just so that you're aware what happens in the back end, like once you create this data entry form, like new for the purchase order or the edit, view edit for the purchase order so I can modify. Once you do that and now somebody's using it, what happens in the back end? Well, I create that purchase order. And in the back end, the output of that is a canonical. It's basically replacing what a map does, what a transform does. And so it is when some user finishes all the data entry, all these UI fields go through a transform, and the artifact that comes out of that in our back end is a canonical. And then that canonical runs through its process and gets mapped out and then gets sent to somebody. And so and once you sort of understand that's what's behind this in Mint specifically, because Mint is all about exchange of transactions. Once you understand that, then you realize, I think makes clear of why these fields need to have certain relationships and why we maintain that so that we get that integrate once, interoperate with everyone. Because I could create something through the UI and then out pops, an X12 transaction or an IDOC or an Edifact, or it goes to the other supply chain partner through a link action and into their NetSuite system through their NetSuite APIs. So once you've created your UIs, how somebody is using them is canonical in, canonical out each time.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Lucy, for the additional background and detail. Any other questions, guys, at this point? All right. If not, I guess again, in spirit of making it interactive and less of me talking at you, out in the chat, and then also in the calendar invite, we have a link out to the exercises that should bring you to a Word doc that looks like this. Again, let's take we'll see how it goes, 5 to 10 minutes here, to work through exercise 2, which is the view edit page configuration. Again, I apologize for those from Lucy's team who don't have a company to work in right now. But let's take some time to work through this. If you're really stuck, feel free to speak up and ask a question. Chances are you're not the only one. But then we'll review. I'll step through this real quickly once we're done, and then we'll move on. All right, guys. But just in the interest of time, let's move. We'll review it quickly together, if that makes sense. Hopefully there's some value in that. If not, feel free to tell me. Again, we're looking at here's for the external manufacturing customer sent PO. So again, to filter that down, we could go to filters. We could copy paste that page name into a page name, or I could search by business object and search for external manufacturing sent purchase order. I'm going to work with commerce here, so I just don't screw up this company for the person whose company this actually is. But either way, you can use the page name or the business object type to kind of filter, enter that here, apply, and narrow it down as far as what's displayed here within the search page. So I'll go to customer sent purchase order, but just for the commerce orchestration here. We select that. Again, initially we come into the consumer review mode. We want to actually perform configuration, so we'll select edit. And the first thing we said is configure fields within the order information section. So first thing I need to do once I jump into edit mode is find that section fields. So it's not transaction information. We're down here in order information. So first thing, just reposition the action field from the second column to the first column under the currency field. So I'm going to just drag and drop, right? That's easy. Bring it over, drop it down below currency. Then we want to add a couple of fields, transaction ID and transaction identifier type to the bottom of the second column. So we want to drop those in under here. So again, to do that, I select the section. So this outline border here, I get my drag and drop icon activates, select that. And again, I can type by like transaction ID, which again filters it down nicely for me. I can drag that over and then identifier type and drag that over here. So again, just a quick as far as how we can reposition, how we can drag and drop on into a section. Again, we can never drag and drop a field just onto the page. It always has to be within the confines of a section. Sub bullet 2 here, add a new section and position it under order information. So I'll use my Greg Firestone cheat here. I'll collapse these first to make our lives easier. And then I'll collapse that guy too. I got to select the outside here. That will activate this icon, a new component. And again, the only component type right now is section. Select apply, that adds a section here. And then I can, again, just like a field, I can drag and drop my whole section up. And drop it down in here under my order information. So I've got my new section here. And then update the section name. So if I select that section, select configure UI properties, I can change that to dates. It also wants me to configure it as a 2-column section. So again, under the column count, I select 2, and my default display is going to be expanded. So when this page opens, it's going to be expanded, making it easier for the users. So I can apply that. And you'll see that kind of takes effect immediately, and that I've changed my section title. Now I have 2 columns. So that's great. I want to add a couple fields. So add the following fields: creation date, time, and submitted timestamp. So again, I've got my section selected, select drag and drop. Creation date and time, I can drag that over, drop that in, and submitted. All right. And then delivery date, we want delivery date in the second column. Drag that over and drop that. And then update the field names. Again, when I helped the build team originally kind of create some of these pages, there were a lot of requirements just to kind of tweak and update the names of the fields. And again, that's what we also saw in Gen 0, Gen 1. Again, each client wants to call something a little bit unique. So it's good to just again understand how to do that. But so for submitted timestamp, how we do that, we just select the given field. Again, configure UI properties, and then that gives us the capability here to change that. So and apply that guide, and that updates that. So in the customer and supplier section, customer group. So now we're going to transition to, from simple fields and management of simple fields to managing groups. So customer and supplier section, expand that. We're interested in the customer group, and we're going to hide a field. So we're going to hide the fax number. So if we scroll down, we can select that. And again, we said from the standpoint of hiding or removing, we have 2 options. Again, the simplest one is to hide. It's a 1-step process here. Select our field and then select hide. Again, this will not be displayed in the consumer view, but we can still see it here within the author author mode. Again, we didn't talk about this guy explicitly today when we were running over the demo, but again, the next thing is basically to say, I want to reposition from one section to another. So I want to take a couple of fields that are in order information and basically reposition those within the transaction information. So I think Tuesday we talked a little bit about this, and that I don't have the capability to just take this field and drag it out into another section. This is going to be a kind of a two-step process. So an existing field, I can drag and drop anywhere I want within the section. But if I want to move it from section to section, again, at first it's a two-step process. I need to basically remove it from this section. Again, whenever we remove things, we pretty much always get a prompt to confirm that. So I'll remove my two fields that I want to reposition. And now by removing that, again, now I can go to transaction information, drag and drop, and they will now be available here to drag and drop into transaction. So bottom of the first column, they'll just drag that down. So any questions there, guys? All right. And then I think the last thing here, we want to transition into managing our line items. So this gets into the management of a collection. And again, things are just a little bit different and unique here. So this is a little bit more similar to what we saw on Tuesday with configuring a search page. Again, it's a tabular display here of the collection of data for our PO line items in this case. So the first thing we want to do, sub-bullet 1 there, is add the unit price field as a column. So again, we select our table. We can drag and drop. Again, unit price, drag and drop that onto our table. It's going to add it out here on the end. And then again, where do we want this? Position between net price and delivery date. So I can just drag that over and click it in there between net price and delivery date. We want to reorder columns next so that delivery date appears between item code value and quantity. So if I grab my delivery date, again, it's a little sensitive here, guys, but it gets the job done. Let's see, item code value and quantity. Drop it in there. Then we want to remove a column. So again, something else that we've done a fair amount of. If we select that, again, similar construct to a field, remove icon highlights, select that, we'll confirm it and apply it. And then that column is removed. And then last thing, or not last thing, but 4, we want to update the name and literal of line to line number. So we'll select that. Let's configure UI properties and apply that. And then, so that's kind of how we manage a collection, the table portion of the collection. All right. Any questions there, guys?
So I was just trying that. Can we not copy any field, and because it's mostly like a generic field, can we not copy one of those fields? It's always going to be like adding the field.
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, and it kind of ties back into maybe what Lucy shared is that
Okay.
it's not like we can just kind of create like within the OSE author mode, right? We can't just kind of create fields. They always have to be synced with what's in the canonical. So
yeah. Let me give it a different way of thinking about it. Think of these Mint UIs as UIs for creating canonicals. So they can only, if you're going to create a UI to create a canonical, you can only have data fields that exist in the canonical. Because if you try to introduce your own net new field, now there's no ability to maintain, integrate once, interoperate with everyone, because now we're going to start to say, oh, well, I need this one field for this one supply chain partner. Now you have a point-to-point integration. So we don't want to circumvent, integrate once, interoperate with everyone. So if we need a new field, the canonical has to get updated. It comes back to the product team. And again, we're doing monthly updates for those kind of things.
Got it.
Because we want to
Okay.
keep the whole supply chain interoperable with each other. This is how, for example, EDI, which was meant to be a standard to keep everybody in the industry interoperable, and how every company implemented their own customizations in EDI because they all started doing their own thing. And then everybody needed point-to-point EDI maps, right, for everybody. And because it kind of lost its interoperability that it was intending for. So that's why we're trying to keep our canonical interoperable. The maps can be as custom as you want. And the UIs can be, so long as they use the fields in the canonical. That's like your one golden rule that you kind of have to have.
Got it.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I have like two questions, John. One
Sure,
is,
John.
you know, as we work through the updates in the author mode, right? Like, do you have any recommendations on like when we should be saving our work, or you know, is an autosave, you know? Like
Yeah, great question, Srijan. There is not the concept of like an autosave, so it's not like we're out in the Google sheet and it's just kind of saving for us. So I guess I know like when I was helping out the build team building some of these pages initially, you kind of did take the conservative approach and kind of saved early and often, so that we didn't lose information. But I got to be honest with you, it's been pretty solid, right? I can't really think of a case where, I've done a bunch of edits and then something went awry and I wasn't able to save them. So it's overall the author mode's been pretty solid and it's been working well. Well, let's continue on that. I'll show you one other thing, kind of object related, once we bounce out of this and get Lucy's input on that. But let's wrap this up again. Now, like we've been configuring the main page here. Again, the last thing, step 5 there, configuring the view purchase order details page. What that speaks to is, again, like if I'm in consumer mode or if I'm within Mint and I have a number of lined items here, and I want to view additional fields associated with the PO line item, like I could select that row and then select, view. Likewise, I could add here or I could edit. So those are all going to be 3 separate push panels that appear, and we do have the capability to configure those as well. But again, just to kind of show you from this back to the save question, right? What's built in here is if I say I've made a bunch of changes here, and now I want to go over again, if you recall from the PowerPoint under panels, if I want to configure the view purchase order details panel, I'd need to select a different panel, view purchase order details. If I select that and apply, I'm going to get the prompt that says, hey, you've made some changes. You haven't saved them. So again, it's built in that it's not going to allow you to bounce panel to panel and lose changes. So I can save my changes to the main page. Then I can bounce back into edit mode and we'll select that view purchase order item details panel. Here, apply. Switches my author mode over to the push panel for view details. And again, it's managed in a very similar way to the main page, right? From the concept of I have a header, I have sections, I drag and drop fields into my section. I can have multiple sections. So very similar conceptually, but just wanted to, again, emphasize that we have multiple panels to manage here, depending upon what we're configuring. Again, from a 5A, again, that's just saying, within this section, update the section title, right, from, what did I say here? Well, from item information to PO line item information. I change that. Again, that updates the title of my section. Reposition delivery date. So again, similar there, we can just drag and drop fields within my section. So we want delivery date to be after, below the description, and just bring that up, drop it in under description. Then we want to add a field in 5C. So add the lot number field and position it below description. So again, in a similar way, I select my section, drag and drop, activates, search for the field, lot number. I'm going to bring that in below and after the description. So I can drop that in there. It's not exactly where we want it. Where did it go? How about that? That looks a little bit better. Then hide or remove the line notes. So again, similar concept with here is that I can hide or remove fields. So in this case, I'm just going to hide it, and then I can save that. Any questions there, guys? That makes sense. Was that valuable? I guess. Question to the group.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay. The last thing I just wanted to point out, and again, just to Srijan's question, is that there's another potential source. I like what Lucy said from the standpoint of working with Jake and a user-friendly source of information. But within OSE, under available, right, we have our company solution, but we also have business object types. So I don't know, Lucy, what your take is here, but I've kind of used this from, like when we were working with one client just to see if some of those custom fields had actually been added. So you can go in here
Yeah,
under.
that's a good idea too. It's we still like to do the gap analysis at the transaction and because most people are doing transforms in there in addition to the UI.
Yep.
And we like to get their specs and do the gap analysis there, just to I guess you could use this instead of doing it that way, but I don't know, to me, it's like spec to spec kind of thing, when we do that first tier gap analysis.
Yeah, 100%, Lucy. This was more kind of from I was using it more like when we were working with a client and adding a bunch of fields. Like I went to the UI and tried to drag and drop them, but they weren't there. So then my next stop was kind of to the object here where, went down and saw, okay, are the fields in the object yet? Or is it just the schema hasn't been regenerated, so it's not available to the UI? So that was just kind of
I see what you're saying. Yes, for that purpose, I would definitely, because this gives you everything in one-stop shop in a very readable way. It's hard to see them in that right-hand panel because everything, it's so linear.
Yes.
So this gives you a nice readable view for sure.
Yeah. So like just for instance, if we're down here under like collections, group collections, like this is where we added a bunch of fields to the purchase order item details. So like I drop down here and see, are those fields here or not?
Right.
But it's definitely not. I just wanted to throw it out there as kind of another potential source. It's not ideal, but it's there, guys. If you need to look at the various fields on an object.